How's everybody doing today? We're going to take just a little bit of time to talk about Paleolithic people. Our first lesson, we talked about timelines and talked about decades, centuries, and millenniums, AD and BC, BCE, and CE, all of those different vocabulary words and abbreviations and things of that nature that we're going to need to be able to fully understand a timeline. Today, we're actually going to look at one of the ages that we had talked about when looking at timelines, which is the Paleolithic age. Paleolithic simply means the old Stone Age. Our next lesson will be over the Neolithic, which is the new Stone Age. So it's all part of the Stone Age. It's just broken into two different kind of subcategories. So the Paleolithic people were nomadic hunters and gatherers. Agriculture had not really been introduced at this point. They didn't really know how to grow crops very well. It was pretty much travel around, find food, do what you can to survive. Okay, so we know that they were hunter gatherers. We know that they had to move around a lot. But what did their life actually look like? What were some of the weapons that they used to hunt? Um, did they have fire? How did they use fire? What impact did that have on their lives? What did they use for shelter? And then also, what kind of tools did they use? Those are the things that we're going to look at today. Now, all of this is covered in the readings in both the paper packets that were sent home and the virtual students' class notebooks. It's in your files. You've done assignments on it. It's all there and available to you. This is just kind of a quick rundown of what you're going to be looking at so that you will have a better understanding of the Paleolithic times. All right, so first let's look at the weapons that these people used. Typically, they were made from sticks, rocks, they were tied together. They didn't have drills or hammers and nails or things of that nature that they could use to put these hunting weapons together. So they had to use what they had available to them. So a typical uh, hunt may have looked something like this. This is an image that I'm sure you have all seen. Typically, um, may have been smaller animals, just because, as we all know, a smaller animal would be a little bit easier to deal with. The mammoth there looks a little bit vicious, even for a large group of people. If we can get this to scroll down here. Here's what some of their weapons and tools may have looked like. They could make a bow and arrow. They could make a spear. They could make a club. But all of that is relatively useless if it's not actually sharpened, if it's not something that's going to actually inflict any damage on whatever it is that they're hunting. One of the things that made a drastic difference in the lives of the Paleolithic people was the discovery that they could use flint for their weapons. They discovered that if you hit flint against a rock and break it apart, that it will chip off and that the chips are sharp. So that's what they would use for some of their arrowheads, their cutting tools, make knives, things of that uh, nature. The anything that needed to be sharpened. Flint was a great way for them to do that. All right, so flint also had a major impact on their tools. Think about before they had flint, they didn't have anything sharp to work with. All they had were sticks, stones, tree branches. Those can be used if necessary, but they're not nearly as effective if you don't have a way to cut them. I mean, you think if you were to go outside today and pick up a stick and decide you want to make something with it, one of the first things that you're probably going to want to do is trim it up or cut it or something like that. And if you don't have anything sharp, then that's not an option. All right, so let's look at shelters. I don't have a picture of their shelters on here, but they would typically use caves or rock overhangs, things like that, to make themselves a natural shelter. The problem is you can't move a cave. You can't move a rock overhang. So we've already said that they were nomadic people. They were traveling to survive. They were traveling to hunt and gather food. If they can't take their shelter with them, then they just have to hope that they find a shelter wherever it is that they have gone, or limit themselves to only hunting and gathering in areas where they can find a shelter. Eventually, they were able to make tents and huts out of animal skins and brush and wood, things like that, which using flint for the tools and advancement in tools and advancement in weapons made getting those materials easier, so they were able to have better shelters. So then the last thing that we're going to look at is fire. We think, okay, yeah, fire's important, but was it really that important? I mean, how often do you go out and build a fire to cook your meals? How often do you build a fire when it gets cold? That's what these Paleolithic for. They didn't go and just turn the heater on because they were a little cool. They couldn't go and just turn their stove on because they were hungry. Definitely couldn't throw anything in a microwave. They had to have some way to stay warm and also a way to cook their food. Not cooking food can lead to diseases. It doesn't get any of the bacteria out of the food, so it's not a very healthy way to eat. So they were hunting for this food, but before they had fire, they didn't have a way to cook it. So they die without the food. They may get sick if they eat the food. Not really in good shape there. So fire helped them a lot with their ability to cook their food, purify their food, their ability to stay warm, but also it helped to scare away any predators that may come and try to attack their tents or their cave or whatever it may be that they were staying in. If you don't have a fire, then one, you can't see anything coming after you. So you've got these wild animals. You're living out in the middle of the wilderness and you can't see what's coming into your cave. You can't see what's coming into your hut. You don't have any way to protect yourself once they get there, other than maybe a club or a spear or something like that. Fire allowed them to scare away some of these animals and prevent themselves from being attacked. So that's a quick look at our Paleolithic standard. We'll move into some of the other things tomorrow. Remember to review your timeline today also. And then remember that your parents have a survey that is supposed to be filled out by Friday, September the 11th, about Ames web testing. And also remember to make sure that TestNav is downloaded on your devices.